the European Union would have broken ties with Cuba. And well, this seems to be a change that can't be reversed anymore. The break is important, obviously, especially considering that the regime is already quite isolated as it is. Notice the detail. Let's see. The United States started by pressuring the Cubans, or the government, the regime, let's say, to change course. To make a change, right? That's the idea they've had for a while now, right? And within this idea, well, Europe little by little started to get involved in the issue, right? They started to get involved in the matter. In fact, well, there were several, let's say, hotels that started to close, including European hotels. And the parliament has already requested the suspension of the dialogue between the European Union and Cuba. In other words, there is a suspension of dialogue between the regime and Europe until they take concrete steps toward democracy. That's what they're asking of the Cubans. The European People's Party, the European Conservatives and Reformists, and the UK Liberals. Renew Europe managed to push through a text that condemns, in the strongest possible terms, the systematic repression on the island. The analysis of the Cuban opposition leader, José Daniel Ferrer, according to what the parliament reports, is that today, Thursday, he asked the European Union to suspend political dialogue and also to suspend any cooperation dialogue with the regime until it takes concrete and significant steps toward a democratic transition and immediately and unconditionally releases the approximately 1,300 political prisoners. There was a vote 283 in favor, 199 against 85 abstentions, and that's how the vote was achieved, right? In particular, torture, all kinds of violence, and even threats are being denounced. All of that was being reported there. Some details were even mentioned, right? They talked about malnutrition, mass surveillance, forced labor, and judicial persecution. They talked about a bit of everything, right? About the most serious problems the island is facing. Well, at least they mentioned some of them, didn't they? The European Parliament also expressed its utmost and urgent concern about the dramatic deterioration of living conditions inside Cuba. So there's something there that the Europeans are seeing as very serious. It was very obvious, but it was necessary for them to take a stance, and that's the stance they've taken, right? The idea is that there is a shift, that there is a change. Well, that's what they're doing, right? Will it be? Is it possible? Look, while we're waiting to see what happens, things are definitely happening. I don't know if these are real changes or not, because there's a lot of distrust toward the regime. Obviously not. I don't know how to trust a regime that hasn't wanted to change anything in so many decades. It's very hard to trust them. Yes. But look, maybe the pressure is helping in some way. Because look, this meeting happened, the one we're seeing in this photo, in which, according to the regime, they would have already approved their biggest package of economic reforms in decades. This is because of pressure from the United States. Canel, president? Let's say president, just to call him that, right? He admitted for the first time that the crisis has internal causes, not just external ones. And that caught my attention, that he acknowledged there are internal causes. Even so, there is widespread skepticism. No, neither Cubans believe in that, nor does the United States think there will be real change. But at least that's what they're showing. Time will tell, right? But Cuba's National Assembly of People's Power held an extraordinary session this Thursday to ratify the largest package of economic reforms pushed by the regime in decades. The idea had already been brewing since that time. Marco Rubio had already made comments about that possibility. There have been meetings between top Cuban military officials and US officials, as well as politicians, right? So the pressure is for change to be seen now. For changes to start happening right now, and not just for them to put a little makeup on things, buy some time, and then once the pressure is off, go back to the same old practices, right? Honestly, it's hard to believe there will be any real change. But, Well, right now people have been saying that there are obstacles that aren't external. That's why they don't come from abroad, because there's a blockade and I don't know what else. Well, the usual stuff, right? In that sense, the package would include greater autonomy for municipalities and state-owned companies, agricultural recovery, opening up foreign trade, and a social reform. Among the new measures is that Cubans living abroad could invest on equal terms with state-owned companies and foreign capital. This opening had not been formalized until now, and a reduction in ministries is expected. And this was also interesting. I mean, they have a ton of ministries. Yeah, kind of like the secretariats here in Mexico. They're going to cut them. They're going to cut a lot of them, right? I mean, the government is going to be slimmer, let's say, right? The bureaucracy and all that, right? Let's see how it goes. Meanwhile, let's address other important matters. Ukraine is making moves right now in the northern part. It's making moves in that country to the... Let's look at the map. But it was to be expected, right? Given everything that's been happening, all the attacks that have been going on both sides. Well, it was to be expected that sooner or later there would be concern that some kind of event might happen. Movement from Belarus. Here is Ukraine. And to the north is Belarus. And Ukrainians fear that Belarusian forces might start to be dragged into the war. Yes, because there are already reactions from Russia, right? Oh, let's see. According to Kyiv, there isn't an imminent risk like today or tomorrow, but they do have intentions. They want to start digging trenches. They intend to prepare even more. Russian spy drones are flying very close to Ukraine in Belarusian airspace. I mean, lately they've detected that Russian planes or spy drones are coming through here from Belarus. They come in, they enter, they go back. Like that. That's a bad sign. Obviously, Ukraine is stepping up its efforts, reinforcing fortifications on its northern border, including anti-tank ditches, concrete obstacles, those famous dragon's teeth. You remember those dragon's teeth? They're like triangles, right? They're made of concrete, something like that. I don't know if they have metal or something that doesn't let tanks advance. Come on, a series of things they're putting up. Fortifications, concrete obstacles, dragon's teeth. The idea is to block armored vehicles so that the armed forces can't get through there. They're also putting up spikes there. They're putting up a bunch of things with the idea of limiting the possibility that someone might want to make a move through there, right? And look, today one of the most significant Ukrainian attacks inside Russia took place, specifically in Moscow. The images circulating today of the Ukrainian attacks in Moscow are truly astonishing, aren't they? And in a little while we'll talk about Russia's reactions, because yes, they are also getting a bit intense about it, aren't they? I mean, there's a chance that yes, there could be, that there is an intensification, an escalation. Obviously, we're not going any further. Thank you. Well, there's a landslide. This happened in India, right? After all the rain they've had, a pretty powerful landslide was caught on camera, and there was a risk that it could fall on the cars. So the area had been blocked off beforehand to prevent an accident, right? It's really close. It's really close there. But anyway, that's one of the biggest landslides there's been in recent days. This is after so much rain we've had. So it's logical that it was going to happen sooner or later. So, well, there it is. And there are houses on top of that hill. There are houses, and I don't know how livable they're going to be now after this landslide. But look, let's see if it's possible to see where it started. There it is. Look, there's a building. You can see that part of the mountain collapses, right? Well, there it is. There it is. The video that's been circulating is specifically of one of the biggest landslides. They're even saying it's one of the biggest of the year. Well, another thing that draws attention is this black colored rain that has been appearing in Ukraine, in the capital. Punto Conflicto posted it on Twitter. showing images similar to the ones we showed in the morning of black rain, right? Black colored rain. This is due to the smoke, the surprising amount of smoke that has been reported. Look, here's another image of this, of these, well, yes, like columns of black smoke. In this case, it's more like gray, right? That have been seen. There it goes. Look, there's a drone. There's another drone. Well, it's just that it's been really tough. It's been really tough today. It's like they said, let's make it our mission to wipe out all the fuel refining capacity in and around Moscow. And it's losing. It's causing a huge problem, right? Obviously. Let's move on to other important matters as well. Let's move on to other important matters. Look, the predictions are coming out about how Mexico's match will go today against South Korea. And so far, the predictions, at least most of them, have been or are positive, right? Well, I don't know how you all see it, how you think the match will end. But obviously, yeah, there seems to be a certain confidence. And that's what worries me more, you know, that suddenly they might get overconfident. But well, let's just hope that doesn't happen. Greetings to Eliseo, how have you been? Hello. To Francisco Arce, how have you been? Greetings. MT, to the whole community that's joining the live stream. Awesome. Thank you so much for being here, for joining us. Eliseo says, let's see if they stop threatening. The president of Iran said that it's about mutual respect, says Eliseo. And MT says, let's hope there's a drastic change in Cuba. We need everyone to step up to help instead of fighting, says MT regards. MT, how have you been? Hello? Yes, Roble isn't around here, right? But it would be great to know Roble's opinion and the opinion of the community watching us from there, from Cuba, so we can stay alert and know what they think, right? Do you think there will really be a change, a shift in that sense? It would be super interesting to hear their opinion, right? And well, we'll keep talking about it here too, right? But well, that's how things are in Cuba. Just like the situation in Ukraine, it also shows that there's still a lot to happen. We'll surely be seeing the reactions little by little, right? And we'll be detailing them as we go. But, well, it seems that after so many things, there's no shift, there's no change. And look, check out what Netanyahu says. Let's go there. Intense. Well, things are getting intense in Middle Eastern news. Look, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has come out with a series of comments in which he says that he, right, he is going to be permanently inside Lebanon. Well, his troops, the IDF, he assures that they will do whatever is necessary, but they are not going to leave. Basically, that's the idea. The Prime Minister maintains that the soldiers will remain in a strip defined as a buffer zone for as long as necessary, despite the truce. O sea, que ellos sientan que por desarmado. They will be operating maybe less intensely, but they assure that the Israeli troops will remain in the southern area inside Lebanon for as long as necessary until they... Now, the president criticized the methods used by Israel and pointed out that it is not necessary to bring down an apartment building. He says this, Trump, every time someone is being searched for in the apartments, there are a lot of people and not all of them are from Hezbollah. Basically saying, be careful and don't bomb just for the sake of bombing. That's basically what Trump is telling Israel right now. That too, well, is part of what we're seeing now. And look, I also want to reiterate that 2 hours before they signed, there was an attack in Beirut. Trump took it personally and it really bothered him. So he says, I didn't like it at all. And I've made that very clear. Trump says, I mean, he really didn't like it at all that almost at the time of the agreement, there was an attack over there. This is also, well, I think it's also part of the reason why the signing process was sped up to Wednesday, right? They could have waited until Friday since nothing was missing. But instead, they rushed and signed yesterday. That's at least interesting, right? Let's move on to other important points. Well, great. That's how things are going, right? Let's move on to other matters. How have you been? Greetings. Very good. This is Rublox and Francisco Eliseo. Thank you very much. Let's see how it goes for us, Eliseo. Let's see if we have any predictions out there. 2 says MT. Greetings, MT. 2-1 in favor of Mexico, says Francisco. I saw how you've been, Vic. What's your prediction? Panterita, how have you been? Hello. Rigoberto Bermuda. How about you? How have you been? He says, greetings. He says, today I've seen all the likes. Very good, very good. Well, keep joining us as we head to another one. Let's see what's happening with other topics. Because from what I'm seeing, there's already a reaction from Vladimir Putin regarding Ukraine about the attack that happened. And well, there are other topics too, right? There are several topics pending, but to start with, there's Putin. Apparently, he's already aiming at bombings. And also, by the way, there's a scientific alert about a potential epidemic. It's a really good investigation. Hopefully that investigation will be analyzed by the CDC of each country, because this would mean that certain issues would have to be addressed worldwide. Today we'll talk to you about that. Let's go.